Hello guys, today we're gonna study It's All About Culture. Let's start. Ways of life. There are many different cultures throughout the world. The people of each continent make up hundreds of culture groups. The people in these groups speak different languages and eat different foods. So, as it's telling us, this means that we have many continents in our world, and in each continent it has many countries. Each of these countries has its own way of speaking, own way of eating, own way of dressing. That's what we get to know. We have something called culture identity. What does it mean by culture identity? It's a collection of traits that are seen in a group. This means that when you have some special traits you're gonna find similar in a group of people, this would define their culture identity. Expressions of culture around the world. People everywhere are proud of their own cultures. One way people show their culture identities is through what they wear. People around the world express their culture in different ways. Through architecture, music, and dance also can help to create groups' culture identity. So, you can define the cultural identity of someone or of the country by its architecture, by music, by dance. Because each of these countries has a way of dancing, a way of listening to music, and a way of architecture. Also, clothes, architecture, music, and dance are important ways to express culture. Also, we have something called custom. It's a way of doing something. What does it mean by custom then? It means that it's a habit that a country lives on it. Let's say that in the ancient Egypt there's something in the pharaohs, they were throwing women in the Nile as giving it through to gifts, as gift to a Nile. So this is one of the customs that used to happen in the ancient Egypt in the pharaoh's time. Also, you can find that in each and every country there are some kind of action or some way of doing something that makes it special than the other. Let's say that you can find that some countries eat by sitting on the floor. Other countries they can eat by sitting on chairs and tables. So all of these are called custom. So it's a way of doing something in a different way. An ethnic group. An ethnic group, it's a group of people who have the same language, culture, and ways of life. Some neighborhoods are made up mainly of the same ethnic group. Every ethnic group has its own beliefs and traditions. So, if you ever travel to America, you will find that there is an area or a neighborhood that it's only for Chinese people. So, this is an ethnic group because they're all Chinese, or at least they're all Asians, they all speak the same language, they all eat the same food, and they all have the same way of living. So that's what makes them an ethnic group, because they are in a place that it's different than them. Also, you will find the multicultural. What does it mean by multicultural? Multicultural, it's the neighborhoods that have many cultures. So it can contain many different ethnic groups in the same time, which means that you can find many different cultural identity. So that's why it's called multicultural. Tradition. What does it mean by tradition? It is a custom that is passed on to others. It can be food, music, dance, events, etc. So the tradition is something that you get to know that your father was doing it, your grandfather was doing it, your great grandfather was doing it. It's something that it keeps passing by inheritance, and it's what makes us special, and it's what makes us different than the others. So the tradition is something that it's used to know. It's one type of the customs that you keep repeating it generation after generation. Like for example, here in Egypt, we have a tradition that we should always respect the older people, and we should always take care of someone that is younger than us. So, if you find an old man standing while you're sitting, you will stand up and offer him to sit in your place. Also, when you find a little child crying, you're gonna go and help him or her. So these are traditions that we have been raised on it, that we should respect the older and we should take care of the younger. This is one kind of tradition. Also, it can be a food, like let's say that we're all in Egypt here, we eat mulukhaya. So it's a traditional food. Why? Because it's a food that we have here in Egypt and we are all eating as part of our culture identity. The way of dancing, the way of music, also the events. So anything that the community or the social community around you created it and keep repeating doing it, that's what it's called tradition. Culture groups around the world have similar and different ways of life. These costumes affect family, school, language, food, and other parts of their life. So, our tradition and our customs, you're gonna find that it's affecting everything surrounding us. It's not only something that we're just doing or we have the option not to do it. However, you're gonna find that the culture identity of you, it's affecting you in everything. Also, one of the things that define our culture identity is the way of the storytelling. We have something called literature. What does it mean by literature? It includes the stories and poems that people use to share their ideas. Also, we have myth. What does it mean by myth? It's a story made up to explain the world around us. We have fable. Fable, it is a story in which many animals speak and act like humans. We also have folk tale. It is a story passed from one generation to the next. It helps to keep the tradition of a culture alive. And lastly, we have legend. It is made up story about a real person or event. Many people share legends from their culture. So, you're gonna find that the literature, the myth, the fable, and the folktale and the legend is different from one country to another, different from one culture group to another. Each and every culture group has its own literature, myth, fable, folktale, and legend, and that's what defines their culture identity through telling these kind of stories. Art is only one way of showing your culture identity. Storytelling is just one way people express their culture. Artists, musicians, dancers, and builders also use their talents to express their cultures. Like artists draw, paint, and sculpt artworks. Musicians use sound to create music in another part of the culture. Folk songs express the culture of a group of people. Dancers express culture through traditional clothes, music, and movement. Architecture, it's the art of designing building. So you can find that the music, the dancing, the songs, and the paintings, even the buildings, it's different from one country to another, different from one culture identity to the other. And when you look at some place, this is what defines the culture identity of it. So you will find in Egypt many places that has the Islamic architecture. It's a definition that the Islam reached our country, and you will find that they have a different way of buildings. If you've ever visited Italy, you will find that they have a different way of building and different way of architecture. Same as when you visit Greece, when you visit many countries. Each and every country has its own fingerprint, has its own way of architecture. Same as music, same as songs, same as the way of dancing. If you ever seen India, the Bollywood dance that they make, it's very special, very cheerful, and very colorful. Different than the belly dancing, different than the hip hop dancing like in America, different than the samba in Brazil. So you will find that in each and every country they have a way of dancing that it's different from another country because they have a different kind of culture. Religion. Religion is also one way that can define our culture identity. Religious traditions are also an important part of culture. Communities have special places where people can worship or pray together. Christians worship in church. Muslims worship in masjid. Jewish worship in temple. So, like here in Egypt, you can find many masjids and many church and a very small number of temples. In another country, you're gonna find a small number of masjids, many church and many temples. and so on. So, in each and every country, also their religious traditions is different than the others. Like here in Egypt, when Ramadan comes, we put lanterns, which is the Ramadan fanus, everywhere you can see. We put decoration, we celebrate. We have a different way of celebrating Ramadan than the other countries, than any European countries. Also, you can find in other countries that they're celebrating Christmas by putting a huge tree and putting a lot of presents, different than any other country. So, religious traditions is also another way that is going to define our culture identity. So, what does it mean by worship? Worship, it's the way of you of praying for God and getting close to God and obeying their orders. People gather at a place of worship to share religious traditions. They meet with other people who share the same beliefs. Some worship places offer programs that help the community. So you can find that some church help the community by giving money to the poor or by educating the younger children. Like you can also find in masjid that it helps us to learn Quran and understand it and memorize it very well. So you can find that many worship places is giving things and giving ways that it's going to help our community grow and get better. Now let's talk about immigration and immigrants. What does it mean by immigrants? Immigrants is a person who comes to live permanently in a foreign country. It means someone is from a country and he traveled to another country to live permanently there. Opportunity, it's the chance to have a better way of life. Immigrants, some travel to other countries to find more freedoms. Some travel for better education or jobs. Others wanted to escape danger in their own countries. However, immigrants still faced many problems. So, sometimes people travel or immigrate to another country to find more freedoms that they cannot find in their country. Also, some of them travel for education, to have education in a different country, or to find a job in another country. Also, in some countries there are some kind of danger, like what happens in Syria. So the people immigrate from Syria and they come to another country to live there to escape the danger. So, many reasons that can make you travel from your own country to another country and to live there. But it's not that easy. Sometimes they face problems when they travel. Prejudice. What does it mean by prejudice then? It is the unfair feeling of hate or dislike for people of a certain group, race, or religion. It means that sometimes when you travel to another country, you're gonna find that people doesn't like you because you have a different skin color, or you have a different religion, or that you are from another group. So they will not like you and they will start to act in a not nice way. So this is what it calls prejudice, because this is an unfair feeling. You should not be treated in a bad way according to the group that you're coming from, or according to your race, or according to your religion, or anything that makes you different than someone else, because by the end of the day we're all humans. All people bring their own cultures and customs to communities. Immigrants groups have brought many changes to the community. They help it to grow, they bring money into the community with their businesses, they also continue to help build a diverse community by sharing their customs and traditions. So, when the country has many immigrants, these people come with different customs and different traditions. So, they get their customs and traditions and their culture identity into the new community they're living. So it helps in growing the community. Also, when they travel to another country, they create new businesses that they get it from the culture in their own country. Like, let's say, the Syrian people. When they came here in Egypt, they made a very delicious Syrian food. So we have a lot of restaurants now that serve delicious Syrian food that we didn't have before. The same thing to Chinese. When we had immigrants from China or from Japan, they introduced their way of clothes, their way of designing, and also their way of food. So any immigrant, when he travel or she travels to another country, they transfer their own culture and their own customs and their own beliefs to this country, and sometimes it affects the community and make it grower and add some changes to it. So we need to know that our culture is very important because that's what defines us. The culture tells us who we are, how we look, how we dress, what we listen to, and how we sing and how we dance. It's a part of everything in our life. It includes the language, it includes the business, it includes the art, it includes the religion, and it includes also the way we look. So our culture, it tells us who we are and how we live. So you need to know your culture very well, and you need to know the culture of the other countries around you, so you can get an information and you get to know yourself more, and you can understand the people around you more. Thank you so much for listening, and hope it was useful for you.